Hello and welcome to today's lesson, where we'll be looking at the question, how successful were Lenin's economic policies? So if we take ourselves back to 1917, the end of 1917, when the Bolsheviks had just come into power, Lenin has inherited a Russia where inflation is running out of control, where unemployment is rocketing, productivity is failing, and he's inherited these great expectations among the workers and peasants that the Bolsheviks will address their grievances. For the peasants, that means that the Bolsheviks will finally give them the land that they've been craving, that the provisional government failed to give them. And for the workers, that means improved living conditions. So Lenin was faced with two options. He could either move straight away into a communist form of economy. He could seize control of the factories, seize all wealth in Russia, nationalise everything, and set up his ideal communist state. Or he could maintain the current capitalist system of private property. Now remember that Lenin was still at war at this time, and therefore the radical revolution and move straight away to communism might have seemed a step too far whilst World War I was still ongoing. So basically Lenin has a choice. Does he follow his principles and immediately turn Russia communist, or is he more pragmatic, maintain the current status quo until the war's been finished and until he's stabilised his regime? Lenin chose the latter option, and his first economic policy is known as state capitalism. Lenin chose to prioritise restoring economic stability to Russia before he tried to implement his communist ideology. That's not, however, to say that he was going to abandon communism. He definitely wanted to implement it, but he was struggling to juggle his principles and what he needed to do to stabilise Russia in the short term. He was trying to juggle very different priorities, and that means that this first economic policy kind of a bit fudged, really. It lacks coherence. In some ways, it's a bit of a mashup, really. That mashup is embodied in the name state capitalism. State immediately makes you think communist, state control of property and wealth. And yet capitalism is the exact reverse of that. Individuals owning wealth, property and businesses. So state capitalism is almost a bit of a dichotomy, really, and it really does sum up the contradictions within Lenin's first economic policy. State capitalism mixed together both communist and capitalist elements. Russia remained capitalist in that initially much of Russian industry remained under private ownership. However, communist elements of state control were introduced into the economy. Firstly, a new body, Vyshenka, was created to supervise industry and manage the economy. Vyshenka reported directly to Savnarkam, so here we can see the introduction of state control of the economy. Some industries like banking were nationalised, as well as some individual factories like the Putilov works in Petrograd. This was state sanctioned, but there were also instances of less controlled nationalisation from below, when workers basically just took over factories and declared them state property. Another really communist element of state capitalism is the amount of control workers were given. In November 1917, the Bolsheviks passed the Decree on Workers' Control, which gave workers a say in how their factories were run and ensuring their managers treated them properly. Although it didn't go as far as actually authorising workers seizing control. The Decree on Workers' Control is a great example of the Bolsheviks pandering to and trying to appeal to their most important supporters, the industrial workers. They wanted the workers on side. Of course, however, The workers were not the majority of the Russian population, that was the peasantry, and the Bolsheviks realised that they needed to do something quickly in order to gain peasant support. And that's where the decree on land comes in. Again, this is passed really early on, November 1917, and basically it legitimised peasant land seizures. So since the February Revolution, peasants had been take it upon themselves to seize noble estates. This is something that they'd wanted since emancipation back in 1861. The provisional government hadn't had the guts to sanction any changes to the land because they believed they were a provisional government. They were temporary. They were leaving all the decisions on land up to the Constituent Assembly, which of course we know Lenin only allowed to stand for one day. So you can see why the provisional government didn't make that decision, but it's also probably one of the reasons that they only managed to last February to October. The Bolsheviks realised the provisional government's mistake and they introduced the decree on land in order to win the support of the peasantry. So that's my brief introduction to state capitalism. I'd like you now to turn in your textbook to page 365 to 366, and you're going to complete this task here, as well as this task. Now, to summarise the contradictions within state capitalism, I want you to make this table. What we're going to do is we're going to sort the different elements of state capitalism into elements that were capitalist, into elements that were communist. So look back through your notes. Anything that seems like a capitalist thing to do, put in your capitalist side of the table. Anything that seems to be the Bolsheviks turning Russia communist. So anything about state control, taking away private ownership, workers' control, nationalisation, any of that needs to go in your communist section. Now you've completed that, your table should hopefully look something like this. And this really sums up the contradictions within Lenin's first economic policy that was both capitalist and communist. So remember, this is something that Lenin does because of the circumstances he finds himself in November 1917. He's taken control. Russia is in a terrible economic state thanks to World War I. He just needs to stabilise the economy before he can introduce any major communist reforms. We can see that he wants to do that in the longer term, but also his priority in the short term is simply to survive the first few months after the November Revolution.